In wrestling, almost anything can be forgiven. No matter how bad things get, WWE has a habit of bringing people back, but not the wrestlers on this list. For one reason or another, WWE wants nothing to do with any of these guys. If you want to make sure WWE never hires you again, attacking Vince McMahon is a good place to start. Back in 1992, Kevin Wacholtz, the man better known as Nails, was furious over how much he was being paid. Backstage, he allegedly snapped and went after Vince McMahon. Reports claim that he grabbed Vince by the throat and started choking him out. Sergeant Slaughter reportedly rushed in to pull him away. Wacholtz then tried to sue McMahon for unfair dismissal. That was a case that he didn't win. He also testified against McMahon during the steroid trial, but his open hatred for Vince made him look completely biased, and instead of hurting McMahon's case, his testimony ended up weakening the prosecution and Vince walked free. Ultimately, WWE never bought Nails back, and it's no surprise why. At one point, WWE thought that Velveteen Dream was a future main eventer, but now they won't mention him, won't bring him back, and won't even acknowledge that he ever existed. During the height of his push in 2020, serious allegations surfaced online regarding Patrick Clark Jr.'s conduct outside the ring, including accusations of inappropriate behaviour towards minors. WWE conducted an internal investigation and stated that they found no evidence of wrongdoing, but the controversy damaged his reputation. Velveteen Dream was taken off TV and his big push was quietly scrapped, and he was eventually released in 2021. Many wrestlers who get released get a second chance, but not Patrick Clark Jr. And his life after WWE has been surrounded by controversy too. First there were charges of first-degree battery and trespassing on property, and then later for possession of drugs paraphernalia. Despite all of his potential, it seems that WWE just won't take the risk on bringing him back. Alberto Del Rio had more chances than he ever deserved, and he just kept on burning his bridges. He's been arrested, accused of serious crimes, and spent years publicly trashing his former employer, and now it seems that they don't want to know him. Del Rio's first WWE run ended in 2014 when he was fired for slapping a backstage employee over a racist comment. They eventually brought him back in 2015, but it didn't last long. He no-showed events, failed a wellness test, and then left less than a year later. But the big things that happened were after his time in the company. He's been arrested on multiple occasions, and in 2020 he was charged with kidnapping and sexual assault. The charges were later dropped, but these cases further damaged his reputation. They've rehired plenty of controversial names over the years, but Del Rio seems to have too much baggage for them to touch him ever again. WWE loves to celebrate its legendary Hall of Famers, but not this one. Sunny's legal troubles have ensured that she will never be welcomed back. Throughout the 2000s, she was arrested multiple times, facing charges for DUIs and theft and assault, but in 2022, she crossed a line that she couldn't come back from. She was driving under the influence when she was involved in a fatal car crash. She was later convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 17 years in prison. WWE has made no mention of her, and it's safe to assume they have no interest in ever working with her again. Ryback. His time with the company ended in 2016 after a contract dispute, but instead of quietly moving on, he spent years ripping the company apart online. He buried Vince McMahon, took shots at Triple H, and constantly trashed WWE's booking. He made the news for comments about Vince McMahon's mother after she passed away, and he even took legal action against the company over the use of his name. After years of trashing them, Ryback now says that he'd return, but only if The Rock personally calls him to ask. Yeah, good luck with that, big man. David Benoit never worked for WWE, but he still ended up on their blacklist, not because of anything he did personally, but because of who his dad was. The company has spent years trying to erase Chris Benoit's name, and that means that David has been completely shut out. At one point he was training to become a wrestler and said that he wanted to be known as Chris Benoit Jr. and wear his dad's tights, but either way, if he does become a full-time wrestler, it's not likely to be with WWE. Plenty of ex-WCW stars found success in WWE, but Buff Bagwell isn't one of them. He was fired after just one match back in 2001, and he spent over 20 years trying to get back in their good books, but it looks like it's never going to happen. The official story is that his match with Booker T back in the day was such a disaster that they ended up getting rid of him, but there were also reports of him having a bad attitude. Allegedly, he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way during his short time with the company. There were also reports that his mom used to call up on his behalf either to request time off or to complain about his treatment. He denies that, but whether it's true or not, the story became a running joke in WWE, which didn't help his reputation. Of course, some wrestlers have come back after doing far worse, but Bagwell's life after WWE has been anything but smooth. He's dealt with legal issues, including being arrested in 2021 for hit and run and providing false information to the police. He's also battled substance abuse problems, and in 2020 he was seriously injured in a car accident, with authorities stating impairment from prescription medication was a factor. He even filed a lawsuit against WWE in 2016 over royalties, although the case was dismissed. With all of that baggage, it's no surprise that WWE has never reached out to him. As the head trainer of WWE's developmental system, Bill DeMott was accused by multiple wrestlers of creating a toxic training environment. Over the years, several former trainees have spoken out, alleging that he encouraged bullying and harassment. For years, DeMott's job was training future superstars, but in 2015, numerous wrestlers came forward with claims that he used racial slurs, made homophobic remarks, and physically mistreated trainees. A petition was even created demanding that WWE fire him. In the end, DeMott chose to resign himself. Since then, many wrestlers have openly criticised him, and WWE hasn't made a single attempt to bring him back in any role. They don't usually mind a bit of backstage toughness, but DeMott wasn't seen as tough, he was seen as toxic. And let's be real about this, there's not exactly a great demand for General Rection to make a comeback. WWE loves celebrating the Attitude Era, but one of its biggest female stars seems to have been erased from history. Sable has had no Hall of Fame induction and no nostalgia appearances over the last couple of decades, and when you see some of the people that have been inducted in the Hall of Fame, it's quite shocking that she's not in there herself. She was one of the WWF's most popular women in the late 90s, but behind the scenes, things weren't so glamorous. She sued them for $110 million, accusing the WWF of sexual harassment and unsafe working conditions. The case was settled out of court, and it seemed like that was the end of it, until she shockingly returned in 2003. But after another short run, she left WWE forever. Some assume that WWE distanced themselves from her because of the lawsuit, but there may be another reason that she'll never return. because reports suggest that Brock Lesnar doesn't want her involved. Since marrying Lesnar, Sable has completely removed herself from wrestling, and it's been rumoured that he has discouraged WWE from reaching out to her. But even with Lesnar currently out of the company, it's very unlikely that they're going to pick up the phone and try and rehire Sable anytime soon. Teddy Hart was the youngest person the WWF had ever signed to a developmental contract back in 1998, but he didn't last long. Reports at the time suggested that he was difficult to work with and he had an attitude problem, and so they quickly cut ties with him. They gave him another shot in the mid-2000s, once again signing him to a developmental deal, but a year later he was released again, apparently for similar reasons. And despite being an incredibly talented wrestler, it seems like he never learned from his mistakes. Hart has been arrested multiple times over the years, facing charges including DUIs, drug possession, and domestic-related offences. In 2023, he was arrested again, this time for possession of a controlled substance. Teddy Hart's family connections and raw talent suggested that he could have been a megastar, but at this point, WWE seems to have completely moved on.